Video contains violent content, details that are not suitable for common perception. Please consider before watching. Chapter 189, Pinnacle 3. 100 years ago. The past, when even the exact time is no longer clearly remembered. She asked, gazing at the back of a man holding a sword technique manual in the training grounds. What are you doing? A sword was floating in front of the man. He tried to move the floating sword more naturally. However, the sword that had been hovering in the air soon escaped his chi control and flew away with a whoosh, falling to one side of the training grounds. Clang. As expected, it's difficult. Of course it's hard. The moment the connection of chi released outside the body is severed even slightly, the void attraction will be released. Yes, that's why it's hard. But what if one could handle that chi more smoothly and manipulate the sword like a living horse? Manipulating the sword like a horse? Is that really possible? The chi circulated within the body is the inner force in the Danjian. Inner force strengthens the body with chi, but the moment it leaves the body, the chi naturally disperses. Therefore, to maintain the chi sent outside the body, one needs vast and deep inner force and the enlightenment to concentrate it without dispersing. The man with his hands clasped behind his back responded to Chong Ryong's words. Yes, might be impossible. However, I heard that the great sword masters who were renowned in the old martial world were capable of it. The old martial world. The old martial world. Unlike now, when the overall level of martial artists has declined, there was a time in the past when martial arts flourished. Looking at the oral traditions and records from that time, there was an overflow of techniques that seemed almost absurd. One of them seemed to be what the man was talking about. She shook her head and said, "Even at your age, there's no one as obsessed with the old martial world as you. It's not an obsession. I just want to recreate the glory of the old martial world." Yes, of course. So, what do they call manipulating the sword with chi like controlling a horse in the old martial world? That's the sword that flew out of the scabbard on its own and stopped in front of Mong Muyak, the son of the vice leader. Although it was inside a wooden puppet, Chong Ryong could instinctively tell upon seeing it. Art of sword control. It was none other than art of sword control. Was this actually possible? Shocked by this, she shouted to Mok Jayongun as a warning. It's art of sword control. Art of sword control? At her cry, Mok Jayongun, who was on guard, quickly twisted his body to the side and avoided the sword rushing at him. However, swish. He thought he had dodged the sword, but it changed direction as if someone was wielding it, trying to slash Mok Jayongun's neck. Mok Jayongun drew his evil commandment sword without a moment to think. Clang. Screech. The moment the swords clashed, his body was pushed back nearly 5 steps. Mok Jayongun's eyes flashed with surprise at the unexpectedly fierce sword strike. Who would have thought that this much chi would be infused into the sword that changed direction midway, even though no one was directly holding it? But it didn't end there. Swish. The sword instantly pierced toward Mok Jayongun's glabella as he was pushed back. Seeing this, Mok Jayongun hurriedly raised his sword. Clang. However, Mok Jayongun's sword, which had blocked upward, was instead bounced downward. The force infused into the sword had not diminished at all. Rather, it had grown stronger than before. Mok Jayongun's eyes sharpened. Since this was the main building where the society leader resided, he had adjusted his martial power to match the level of a pinnacle stage of transcendent realm as a precaution, but it seemed difficult to block with this. Don't confront it and dodge. Chong Ryong shouted urgently. At her cry, Mok Jayongun hurriedly executed the light body technique. The light body technique he used was the ghost shadow steps he had learned from Shadow Clan Master. Tap 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 tap. The ghost shadow steps, which valued change, had unparalleled flexibility in foot movements like reeds. While avoiding the sword, Mok Jayongun asked through voice transmission, "What on earth is this?" The chi is manipulating the sword as if it were a living swordsman. It's art of sword control. Art of sword control? A technique that manipulates the sword with chi. Manipulating the sword? Is it possible to control it so precisely? This is the first time even I have seen it in person. Be careful. Swish. As soon as Chong Ryong's warning ended, the sword brushed past the chest of Mok Jayongun, who was employing the steps. Narrowly avoiding it, Mok Jayongun focused his chi on the Yongchen acupoint and kicked the ground. Bam. Mok Jayongun, who instantly gained a distance of more than 6 steps backward, shot profound energy toward the sword that was trying to change direction. Swish, swish, swish. Profound energy flew in succession. The sword seemed to be briefly blocked by the sharp qi. Swish, swish, swish. However, the qi infused in Art of Sword Control was so strong that the profound energy was split instead. It seemed useless to try to block it with just profound energy. At least. Clang. At that moment, something flew in like lightning and struck the sword away. It was none other than Siep Chun, the third captain of the main building. The sword, which had been rampaging on its own, was thrown to the ground by the blue martial saber imbued with blue-colored powerful energy. Clang. The qi is weaker than powerful energy. The qi infused in the sword was above profound energy but below powerful energy. Phew, hey, are you all right? Siep Chun asked Mok Jaeungun while waving his left hand. He had intervened midway, thinking he shouldn't just stand by and watch. Mok Jaeungun was about to express his gratitude for his help when he suddenly shouted, "Help! Look behind you!" Gasp. As soon as Mok Jaeungun's words fell, Siep Chun instinctively sensed a sharp qi and executed his saber technique. Butterfly Saber Technique, Second Stance. Butterfly's Warning. Siep Chun spun his body like a top while wielding his saber. Then a whirlwind of powerful energy surged due to the blue-colored saber energy infused in the blue martial saber. That guy isn't ordinary either. An exclamation escaped Chong Ryong's mouth. The saber technique Siep Chun executed was so outstanding that it could be called a transcendent saber technique without hesitation. Even with Art of Sword Control, it seemed difficult to penetrate that saber technique. However, swish. The sword soared upward. Then it pierced from above Siep Chun, who was spinning while executing the stance. No way. Siep Chun's eyes widened. Just like the eye of a typhoon is calm, the only gap in the butterfly's warning stance was right above where the stance was being executed, and it had penetrated that in an instant. Realizing it wouldn't work, Siep Chun twisted the trajectory of the stance and executed a variation. Butterfly Saber Technique, 8th Stance. Butterfly Dance in full bloom. Swish, 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 swish. The saber trajectories of the butterfly saber, fluttering like a butterfly, created numerous afterimages and instantly trapped the sword that had been piercing towards Siep Chun's crown. Clang, 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 clang. The sword, trapped in the net created by the dazzling saber technique, bounced around wildly, losing its strength. Seeing this, admiration flashed in Mok Jaeungun's eyes. Seeing the net created by the dazzling saber technique, it seemed evident how exceptional Siep Chun's combat sense was. He was completely blocking the connection of qi to the sword. Has it been severed? The sword could no longer do anything. Not only Mok Jaeungun but also Siep Chun, who had trapped the sword with his saber technique, was confident of this. However, Mok Jaeungun frowned. Although the qi connection was severed, to find out who had utilized Art of Sword Control and in what way, he opened the power of his third eye. What the hell is this? It was completely different from what he expected. He thought there would be traces of qi connecting to the sword. But there were no traces of qi. Why are you doing that? There are no traces of qi connected to the sword. What? If qi had been connected to the sword, traces of it should have remained visible to this eye. However, nothing could be seen. That meant the sword had truly moved on its own? While he was puzzled, Chong Ryong clicked her tongue in admiration. Sword and self as one. The sword itself has been used as a medium for qi. What do you mean by that? Instead of sending qi to the sword to connect it, the sword itself is made to gather and manipulate qi. That's why the sword can be freely controlled like this. Ha! She was genuinely impressed by this. She had even doubted whether Art of Sword Control was actually possible. But now she had seen the answer to that. And thanks to that she realized. Mortal. This isn't a technique that can be achieved by simply surpassing the wall. Then, one must reach a realm where they can harmonize with the surrounding qi and themselves. At least the pinnacle stage of the transformation realm. Or surpassing the wall of walls. That means, yes, there is only one person here who can display such profound arts to this extent. The society leader. Mok Jaeungun sent a voice transmission with a confident tone. The only one who had reached a realm beyond walls, to the point where even Mok Jaeungun, who had surpassed walls himself, could not discern the authenticity of qi with his third eye. That person was none other than the society leader of the Heaven and Earth Society, the sole person among the 6 heavens. Chong Ryong spoke in a rather serious voice. There are mountains beyond mountains indeed. She had guessed that he might have reached the realm of profound realm after reaching beyond the walls. But now that she knew for certain, the path of revenge still seemed far away. Perhaps Mok Jae-eun was feeling similar to her. At that moment Mok Jae-eun's shoulders trembled faintly. This guy. Could it be that he had encountered a wall? This was the first time she had seen him react like this. Seeing his appearance, Chong Ryong inwardly understood. When faced with a being whose limits are unknown, it's natural to feel awe or fear. As expected, even you mortal are human after all. Twitch twitch. Chong Ryong couldn't hide her puzzlement. That was because she saw the corners of Mok Jae-eun's mouth, whose shoulders were trembling even more, twitching. Is this guy actually smiling? Shouldn't one feel fear after encountering a wall? He's smiling in this situation. She thought she might have seen it wrong, but the corners of Mok Jae-eun's mouth were faintly raised. Mortal, are you really smiling? Huh. Was I smiling? What? You didn't even know what expression you were making. Ah. I almost made a mistake. A mistake? Why were you smiling in the first place? Just because. Just because. Yes, it seems that martial arts have more room for further exploration than I thought. At Mok Jae-eun's answer, Chong Ryong was inwardly surprised. To this guy, martial arts were nothing more than a tool for revenge. But after encountering a higher level of martial arts, instead of being blocked by a wall, he was showing interest in it. Ha! Does this guy even realize how much his mindset has changed? But there was no need to mention it. This was moving in a very good direction. It was right at that moment. Clang. No way. Seop Chun, who was confident that he had completely severed the sword's chi by continuously executing the stances of the butterfly dance in full bloom, tried to stop it. But at that moment the sword revived and pierced his shoulder. There was no time to dodge. However, clang. The sword that was about to pierce his shoulder suddenly lost its strength and fell to the ground. Huh. What's going on? Could it be that the person who has been moving the sword with chi had released the connected chi? While he was puzzled, Seop Chun stepped back to gain distance. Then he looked towards the entrance of the training grounds. The person who had controlled the sword with chi might be there. However, there was no one at the entrance. Who is it? He couldn't sense any chi in the surroundings based on his perception. But it was right at that moment. Rustle. Suddenly, there was someone standing in the middle of the training grounds with their hands clasped behind their back, their face wrapped and covered with cloth like a bandage. The moment he saw that person, Seop Chun's eyes widened and then, bam, thud. He knelt on one knee, clasped his hands together, lowered his head and shouted, Seop Chun, the third captain of the main building, pays homage to the society leader of the Great Heaven and Earth Society. As soon as those words ended, Mong Muyak was also startled and knelt on one knee, paying his respects like Seop Chun. Paying homage to the society leader. Society leader? This person. Mok Jae-eun's right eyelid trembled faintly. Would everyone present here see this? The chi stored within that person's body was so intense and thrilling that no chi he had ever seen could compare to it. He even wondered what would happen if that chi were to be unleashed. Is this the pinnacle of the Heaven and Earth Society? He was in awe. Jae-eun. Seop Chun, the third captain of the main building, urgently called out to Mok Jae-eun. T was disrespectful to stand there blankly when the society leader himself was present, not just anyone else. At this, Mok Jae-eun knelt on one knee and paid his respects, following their lead. Seeing that, Seop Chun sighed in relief. At that moment, thump thump, footsteps were heard, and the society leader's legs appeared right in front of him. Seop Chun lowered his head even more with a tense expression. Then a voice was heard. Cough cough. What are you doing? Ah. At that voice, Seop Chun's eyes trembled. He had a hunch, but was this profound art of the sword moving on its own a test from the society leader for them? He had wondered why they were summoned here, but he didn't know it would be for something like this. Tremble tremble. It was indeed a test. Seop Chun spoke with an utterly excited voice as if it were an honor. My skills are insignificant. I merely did my best. No. Not you. Pardon. At this, the startled Seop Chun slightly raised his head. However, the gaze of the society leader, whose face was wrapped and covered with a bandage, was directed at Mok Jae-eun. Moreover, it was with a rather intrigued look. Why on earth? Why was the society leader reacting like this? While he was puzzled, the society leader spoke again. How did you scatter the chi infused in the sword? What? Chapter 190. The Test, 1. Half a moment ago. In the society leader's quarters located at the topmost floor of the main building. The society leader, whose face was obscured by shadows as he had his back to the lantern, had his face wrapped in bandages. The expression of the Shadow Clan master Huan Yixian, who was looking at him, was stiff, unlike his usual self. So this is why he kept hiding his appearance. As the Shadow Clan master who had thought it was because he had suffered an incurable injury, he couldn't help but be quite shocked. To him, the society leader said while wrapping the bandages. Cough cough. Why do you think I showed this to you? At the society leader's question, Shadow Clan master Huan Yixian couldn't easily answer. The intention behind hiding this until now and only revealing it to him, who was in charge of confidential matters and information. Of course, there were a few guesses that came to mind. The first was the impact it would have if this fact were to be known. It would likely cause a big commotion even within the Heaven and Earth Society. This is an obvious problem, and the next is indeed the society leader's trust. It seemed that even before, but especially after his illness had worsened, he didn't trust anyone except for the vice leader and his closest aides. If that's the case, perhaps you have determined that there are spies even within the inner fortress? At his words, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian snorted with a displeased expression. This meant affirmation. Spies. Spies were bound to appear from time to time. Even the Righteous Sect Alliance, a martial arts alliance opposing the Heaven and Earth Society, frequently sent spy organizations called the Silent Strides to investigate and disrupt the Heaven and Earth Society. The role of catching such spies belonged to the Shadow Clan. However, the fact that he had hidden it even from him, the head of the Shadow Clan, I am also a subject of suspicion. It was troublesome. Although he tried his best to manage his expression and not show it, Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian was not pleased with this situation. Because he was a person of the Fire Faith Order. The fact that he, as such a person, had become a subject of suspicion was not good for the future reconstruction of the Fire Faith Order. For a brief moment, Huan Yixian fell into contemplation. I must somehow regain trust. Otherwise, even the reconstruction of the Fire Faith Order might become impossible. Fortunately, the fact that he had revealed the hidden truth, even if it was for a test, meant that there was still some trust left. At that moment, the society leader who had finished wrapping the bandages, got up from the bed. The society leader spoke. The Imperial Palace has requested the later generation disciples again this time. You are aware of that, right? For over a decade, the Imperial Guards, a special agency of the Imperial Palace, had been requesting young later generation disciples from the Righteous Sect Alliance and the Heaven and Earth Society, claiming to be reorganizing and reforming. Although it seemed like a simple request, it was a policy of the Imperial Palace to maintain its relationship with the martial arts world. The Righteous Sect Alliance had already been accepting their request and sending later generation disciples since the beginning, but the Heaven and Earth Society did not do so. To the society leader's words, Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian replied, yes. However, since it was a matter not approved by the society leader. Cough cough. It's not a matter worth approving. How can the martial arts world and the government coexist? Of course, this was not the only reason. The Imperial Palace and the government had taken the side of the Righteous Sect in the war between the Heaven and Earth Society and the Righteous Sect Alliance. As a result, the Heaven and Earth Society faced a disadvantageous situation in the war. This was the reason why the Heaven and Earth Society did not officially move in the direction the Imperial Palace wanted, even though they did not have a grudge against them. But we can no longer just stand by and watch. If we can no longer just stand by. Vice Leader. The society leader called for the Vice Leader. The Shadow Clan Master looked at him with a puzzled expression. Then the Vice Leader continued. Officially, our association has rejected the Imperial Palace's request, but the society leader's direct subordinates have been making their own investments in addition to the spies being sent to the Imperial Palace. Their own investments? What does this mean? Could it be that they have built friendly forces on the Imperial Palace's side? When did they go to such lengths? While he was thinking, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian answered. Imperial Consort Co. Imperial Consort Co? She was one of the two consorts currently most favored by the emperor. That favor was so great that her 7-year-old child, overriding the grown children of the empress, became the crown prince. As a result, she became one of the 4 people wielding absolute power in the imperial palace. Ha! The Shadow Clan master clicked his tongue. Of course, there were also Shadow Clan spies in the imperial palace. However, most of the spies were active for information purposes, and there was no special intervention in the imperial palace. But while the society leader outwardly took a hardline stance, saying that he could not coexist with the imperial palace, he had intervened in the inner palace behind the scenes. In a sense, it was truly astonishing finesse. It's truly remarkable without even a word to the Shadow Clan. It was just a precautionary measure. Anyway, through the information from Imperial Consort Sio's side, we learned that this information is certain enough to take action. Then you plan to attempt a rescue? Yes. The answer came from the society leader. At his resolute voice, the Shadow Clan master felt his determination. The society leader had been continuously seeking that person instead of physicians since his illness had worsened. He would never let go of this opportunity. However, the situation of that person falling into the society leader's hands was just as bad as being detained in the imperial palace. What should be done about this? At that moment, the vice leader continued. So this time, we will accept the imperial palace's request. Then you're going to dispatch later generation disciples. That's right. At the vice leader's words, the Shadow Clan master silently looked at him. It was utterly ironic. He had predicted such a situation when he heard the news of that person's detention. Due to the emperor's illness, there were signs of internal strife in the imperial palace. Therefore, the various factions in power were fiercely competing to seize power in many departments. This was indeed an opportunity. Then to recruit the later generation disciples to dispatch. No, there's no need for that. The vice leader shook his head. The Shadow Clan master Huan Yixian was puzzled by this. To rescue that person imprisoned in the underground golden prison of the imperial palace, they needed to recruit suitable talents, so why was there no need for that? Could it be you plan to proceed in secret? At the Shadow Clan master's words, the society leader coughed and smiled faintly. As expected, his prediction was correct. The society leader was someone who was cautious to the extent of being convinced that there were spies within, to the point of hiding it even from him. If that's the case, if they were to officially recruit and dispatch later generation disciples to the imperial palace for the mission, this information would flow to the mastermind through the spies, and there would be significant obstacles. Then what do you plan to do? If recruitment was impossible, they had no choice but to secretly designate and issue secret orders. However, Shadow Clan Master, did you separately inform your disciple? Inform? Oh, I just told him to bring him straight here. Suddenly, the Shadow Clan Master stopped mid-answer and frowned. Then, as if glaring at the vice leader, he asked, "You're not planning to send my disciple, are you?" "That's right." At his answer, the Shadow Clan Master was at a loss for words. He had a hunch, but it turned out to be true. In the case of secret orders being issued, it was often carried out abruptly like this. That was to prevent information from spreading outside. However, there was an issue to raise here. Vice Leader, that child has just completed the Corpse Blood Valley and become my disciple. He's not yet at the level to take on a dispatch mission. If he passed the gate of the Corpse Blood Valley as the top disciple, his abilities are sufficient. But you know that child's background, don't you? I trust that child belonging to us, but is there a problem with trust? Pardon. I heard that he showed his will to be loyal to our sect in front of everyone at the Corpse Blood Valley's closing ceremony. It reached the ears of the society leader and vice leader. As expected, they were aware of most things, operating their own direct intelligence unit. However, it was utterly unacceptable. Even if that child, Mok Jiangun, had made a pledge, there was no way the society leader or vice leader would believe it right away. Rather, they were figures who would continue to test that child for a while to verify it. But they're saying they'll entrust such an important mission to that child, believing in him? What are they thinking? The Shadow Clan Master spoke in a troubled voice. I'm grateful for your words as his teacher, but if that child who hasn't even received training as a spy yet, is entrusted with such a mission and fails, he's not being sent alone. Pardon. There are already 3 people who have been dispatched unofficially in advance, and with the official dispatches per the request, your disciple and 2 others will be additionally dispatched. Ah. Imperial Consort Sio's side wanted trustworthy personnel, so we had to select quickly, and your disciple was inevitably chosen. Inevitably. The Shadow Clan Master's eyes narrowed. Could this really be explained away as inevitable? If Mok Jaeongun were not a hostage of the righteous faction and had been his disciple for 10 years, it might be an understandable selection. This was probably a test. It wasn't a test just for himself. It seemed to include a test for that child, Mok Jaeongun, as well. It was truly troublesome. To him, the vice leader spoke with a soft sigh. Don't be too dissatisfied. I'm not only sending your beloved disciple but also my own son. Your son, you mean Mong Muyak? That's right. At this, Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian couldn't hide his inner surprise. He had thought it was a test to make things difficult for him and Mok Jaeongun, but if it included Vice Leader Mong Xiuqion's son Mong Muyak, the matter was different. Wasn't Mong Muyak the successor of Vice Leader Mong Xiuqion and one of the 5 tigers, known as the Heaven and Earth Society's greatest later generation disciples? Even he is being dispatched on such a dangerous mission? What is the intention? Anyway, he had no choice but to follow the society leader's orders. It was definitely not a desperate measure to reassure him. However, the fact that they were even sending the vice leader's son. Could it be? Huan Yixian glanced at the vice leader. Vice leader Mong Xiuqion's eyes were strangely bitter. Seeing this reaction, it seemed that the vice leader was also not very pleased with sending his child on this rescue mission. It seemed to be to prove his loyalty to the society leader. That position is not very good either. Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian clicked his tongue inwardly. It was so pitiful that even the vice leader, one of the closest aides, had to continue proving his loyalty in this way. Since my son, the vice commander of the society leader's direct subordinates, is also being dispatched, do not raise any more objections. I understand. Anyway, it was impossible to object further. If he continued to object, it would only incur the society leader's anger and suspicion. There's no other way. Now that it had come to this, it seemed he had no choice but to trust Mok Jaeongun. Fortunately, Mok Jaeongun was a person of the Fire Faith Order just like himself. Though, come to think of it, it might actually be for the best. It could be an opportunity to prevent that person from falling into the society leader's hands. At that moment, click, the society leader opened the window. Then looking down he spoke. Cough cough. They're here. What do you mean? The 3 people to be dispatched. With those words, the society leader's eyes narrowed as he looked down at the training grounds below. That guy. The hostage of the righteous faction who had mastered the Moonsword technique. The society leader's gaze became strange. He had thought that with the existence of Wai So-yun, the earth-preserving sword and the Moonsword technique were meaningless. That's why he had sent him to the Corpse Blood Valley without any lingering attachment. But not only did he survive, he even became the Shadow Clan Master's disciple. Truly a peculiar child. In the end he will find his place. That is fate and the natural order. The words that person had said came to mind. Then is all of this because of that so-called natural order? Even the fact that that kid survived there. After looking down for a while, the society leader grabbed a sword technique manual and lightly waved his fingers. At that moment, whoosh. Sharp profound energy rose from him. Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian, who was watching from behind, was gripped by a sense of unease. What is he trying to do? While he was puzzled, the society leader continued to wave the sword technique manual. He wanted to watch closely what he was doing, but he couldn't. At that moment, the society leader, who had been waving the sword technique manual as if commanding a battle formation, suddenly stopped his hand and trembled. Then, look at this guy. He showed a reaction as if it were absurd. He even had his eyes wide open. What could have happened to make him react like that? While thinking that, So, society leader. The society leader jumped out the window. The startled vice leader Mong Xiuqion and Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian ran and looked down below the window. The society leader, who had landed on the ground with a light body, glanced at the sword that had fallen on the ground, then turned his gaze back to Mok Jaeongun and asked, "How did you scatter the chi infused in the sword?" What? At those words, the eyes of Siup Chun, the third captain of the main building, widened. What does this mean? Mok Jiongun scattered the chi infused in the sword? Oh. Wasn't it him who blocked the sword flying at Mok Jiongun and severed the chi to stop it? It was utterly incomprehensible. At that moment, could it be? Seop Chun recalled the moment when the sword had revived for a moment and then lost strength and fell. Could it be that it wasn't the society leader who had withdrawn the chi? Oh. Something is strange. If it was a method of creating a net with a saber technique like he did, the connected chi could be severed, but otherwise how was that possible? Tap 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 tap. At that moment, 2 more people landed in the training grounds. They were none other than Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian and Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian. Not knowing exactly what had happened below, they were puzzled and asked, "Society leader, why are you?" Swish. The society leader raised his hand, signaling them not to intervene. At this, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian stopped speaking and looked around. The hilt of a sword lying on the training ground floor. And seeing the numerous saber marks filling the surroundings, he could roughly guess what had happened. Did the society leader test them? Judging from him waving the sword technique manual, it seemed he had used Art of Sword Control. However, midway the society leader had looked absurd. Huh. Look at this guy. Did someone among them surprise the society leader? But was that even possible? No matter how severe his illness was, the only ones who could block the society leader's Art of Sword Control were the 2 people with the title of 8 stars or the head of the Elder Council, not anyone else. At that moment the society leader spoke again. Why is there no answer? Following the society leader's gaze, the 2 executives also turned towards Mok Jiongun. Then Mok Jiongun spoke. This lowly one does not know what you mean. Everyone was puzzled by his response as if he truly had no idea. At this, the society leader soon chuckled. Cough cough. Do you think you can deceive my eyes? It was clearly you who did it. The society leader spoke with a confident voice. Then Mok Jiongun, with his head lowered, repeated the same words again. This lowly one truly does not know what you mean. At his words, the society leader scoffed. Then, is that so? Then this will be an unfortunate accident. Swish. As soon as those words ended, the society leader lightly nodded his head. Clang. Swish. A sword from the weapon rack on one side of the training ground drew itself and flew towards the head of Mok Jiongun, who was kneeling with his hands clasped. How? Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian flinched for a moment at the society leader's sudden outburst. It was because he had agonized in an instant whether to block it or not. But at that moment something astonishing happened. Bam. Clang. The sword flying towards Mok Jiongun's head suddenly stopped as if it had lost strength and fell to the ground. Everyone who witnessed this scene couldn't hide their shock. That youngster blocked the society leader's Art of Sword Control without moving a single finger? Chapter 191. The Test 2. Everyone in the training grounds couldn't hide their shock. It was something no one had expected. The society leader, known as one of the 6 heavens and the current peak of the martial arts world, and rumored to have surpassed the Wall of Walls, was a truly unrivaled supreme grandmaster without equal. The Art of Sword Control he wielded was not a technique that a mere later generation disciple, a youngster, could block. However, an unbelievable event occurred. Clang. The flying sword stopped right in front of Mok Jiongun and fell. This shocked not only Mong Muyak and Seop Chun, the 2 people of the 5 tigers responsible for the next generation, but also the executives Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian and Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian. How on earth did he do it? Huan Yixian looked at Mok Jiongun with wide eyes. He was still kneeling with his head lowered, paying his respects. But the sword had fallen midway. Judging from the society leader's reaction, it was definitely not him who had done it. Is this guy him? Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian's eyes flashed with surprise. That was because, as the one managing even the society leader's direct information department, he was familiar with most of Mok Jiongun's background. He was a youngster who had been taken as a hostage of the righteous faction's Yun Mok Sword Manor just a month ago. According to the report he had heard from Myung Dawang's son Yun, although he had talent with the sword, he had started martial arts too late and had no great prospects. Was it possible for such a guy to do this? Who the hell is this guy? Based on the chi perceived externally, he was a peak expert. With this level of skill, forget blocking Art of Sword Control, he should have been instantly pierced through. But how on earth did he do it? Unlike the two people who were puzzled, there was someone who was admiring him. She was none other than Chong Ryong. Ha! Chong Ryong was watching everything from inside the wooden puppet. No one here knew Mok Jae-un's true strength, but she was aware of his true face. This mortal guy is truly a monster. She couldn't help but be amazed. That was because although Mok Jae-un had reached the realm of the transformation, Art of Sword Control was an even higher level technique, so it was not something Mok Jae-un could handle yet. However, after seeing the chi connection to the sword being severed twice, she could be certain to handle the death chi so delicately. An exclamation naturally escaped. In conclusion, Art of Sword Control was a high-level technique that gathered chi in the sword itself and manipulated it. Therefore, it was practically impossible to sever the chi connection using the method Seop-chan had employed. However, Mok Jae-un had taken a difficult gamble. He had used the death chi that disrupts the yang chi to scatter the society leader's chi concentrated in Art of Sword Control. At first glance it might seem easy, but in reality it was not at all. To send the death chi outside the body and intervene in Art of Sword Control, which moved quickly across space, required delicate and precise control. This was something that couldn't be done without innate senses and tremendous concentration. The mortal's potential and growth speed are truly. It was beyond the realm of humans. From the perspective of someone watching closely, it was so remarkable that he could only be thought of as a monster. However, apart from this amazement, there was also a concern. You've made a mistake, mortal. Chong Ryong looked at the society leader, whose face was wrapped in bandages, revealing only his eyes. He's probably that person's descendant. Whether he's his son or grandson, this will only invite that person's scrutiny. It was an unavoidable situation since he had aimed for his life, but it would have been better if he had moved his body and dodged with difficulty. Disrupting a high-level technique in this way was more likely to raise suspicion. If it were her, she could have even killed Mok Jae-un on the spot. However, the society leader, who had been staring at Mok Jae-un, suddenly burst into hearty laughter. Then he soon began coughing again. Cough, cough. Blood was mixed in with his cough. Seeing this, Vice Leader Mong Seocheon spoke in a perplexed voice. Society leader, you shouldn't overexert yourself. Cough, cough. Swish. The coughing society leader soon waved his hand lightly and said, No, no. The society leader straightened his waist. Then approaching Mok Jae-un, he said, Well, what excuse will you give now? Will you say you didn't do it again this time? At his words, Mok Jae-un didn't answer. Then Vice Leader Mong Seocheon pressed, Won't you answer right away? This guy truly. It was the moment when the angry Mong Seocheon was about to express his rage. Mok Jae-un spoke. Then I have no choice. Yes, I did it. With those words, Mok Jae-un raised his head and looked at the society leader confidently. Seeing his behavior, Vice Leader Mong Seocheon was dumbfounded. Who was the person present here? It was the society leader of the Heaven and Earth Society. How could someone who had pledged loyalty to the sect and was subordinate behave so impudently? How insolent. Shing. Vice Leader Mong Seocheon soon half drew the sword from the scabbard at his waist. Then Shadow Clan Master Hwan Yisian blocked his way, clasping his hands together in a formal greeting and said, Vice Leader, please calm down. Calm down. Are you defending him because he's your disciple? How could that be? But isn't a disciple's mistake also the responsibility of the teacher who taught him? So please reprimand me instead. Now to say that. Enough. Swoosh. At that moment, Vice Leader Mong Seocheon and Shadow Clan Master Hwan Yisian looked at the society leader with startled eyes, overwhelmed by his domineering spirit. This chi is unbelievable. How can he be called someone with a severe illness? The chi emanating from the society leader was so immense that it was suffocating, enough to surprise even the two masters. Mok Jae-un's left eyelid trembled even more as he watched this. It was truly admirable, even though only a part of it was released. He had been curious about what it meant to surpass the wall of walls, and it definitely exceeded his expectations by far. It would be reckless. If this was the level with only a partial release of chi, if he used his full strength, it seemed he could annihilate everyone present, including himself, not in a few moves but within a few breaths. The level itself was completely different. Is this the current pinnacle of the martial arts world? While he was in awe, the society leader spoke. Since you've confessed with your own mouth that you did it, shall we hear how you did it? At his question, Chong Ryong hurriedly advised. Make up an excuse. Anyway, living humans cannot detect the death chi, the chi of the dead, so there's no way for him to find out. Right. That's what we should do. Of course, Mok Jae-un also intended to do so. However, that chi you used to intervene in the art of sword control and scatter it. It's quite unique. At his words, Mok Jae-un's expression stiffened. Chong Ryong was equally surprised. How could that be? The death chi was essentially an undetectable chi. It was not something living humans could sense, so no martial artist who had faced Mok Jae-un until now had noticed it. But did the society leader really sense it? Chong Ryong was momentarily amazed but spoke calmly. He might be intentionally probing you because he can't detect the chi. Don't fall for it, mortal. Do you really think so? Mok Jae-un was also puzzled. The strength of the death chi was that it was a chi that living humans couldn't detect. But if they could sense it, that advantage would be lost. At this, Mok Jae-un cautiously parted his lips. You flatter me. I merely applied the chi of my sect. Your sect? Yes. The reason he attributed it to his sect was because of the martial arts world's tacit rules. Even in a relationship where loyalty was pledged, unless it was a special case, martial arts were a precious asset and secret to that martial artist, so they wouldn't pry into it. Mok Jae-un had aimed for this. However, is that so? But from what I feel, although the Shadow Clan Master's chi has a yin tendency, your chi seems quite complex. At those words, Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian also frowned and looked at Mok Jae-un. At this, Mok Jae-un's eyes narrowed. He hoped it was just a probe, but it seemed the society leader was truly detecting his chi. Although he could waver, Mok Jae-un spoke calmly. Before my master taught me martial arts, I already learned various martial arts, so that's why. You learned various martial arts? Yes. There's the martial art of the Yun Mok sword manner. I believe the society leader is well aware of the reason I came here. At these words, the society leader's eyes turned strange. It was because he immediately understood the meaning of what Mok Jae-un had said. The moon sword technique. That person had deciphered that cursed secret manual that no one else could master. Recalling this, the society leader chuckled and soon spoke with his hands clasped behind his back. I did want to see it at least once, but it seems this is the reason why you were chosen by that secret manual. Pardon? Should we take another look? With those words, the society leader nodded his head. Then the sword that had fallen to the ground rushed towards Mok Jae-un. Just dodge it. Chong Ryong shouted. However, Mok Jae-un's thought was different. He felt he needed to know for sure whether the society leader was probing him or if he had truly detected his chi. If he had really detected the death chi, it was suspicious for him to continuously test him like this. Therefore, clang. Mok Jae-un concentrated his death chi and scattered the chi of the sword flying at him with art of sword control once again. No. Didn't I tell you to just dodge it? No. Let's see first. What? I need to know if he really can detect death chi. Anyway, if someone in the society leader's position suspected that chi, it would be difficult to keep dodging. In that case, it was better to verify its authenticity, Mok Jae-un judged. Right at that moment. Your senses are excellent. Then can you handle two? What? Swish. The society leader grasped the sword technique manual and lightly waved his hand. Then two swords were drawn from the swords hanging on the wall, and they simultaneously rushed towards Mok Jae-un. Swish. Swish. The two swords flew from different directions, aiming for Mok Jae-un's head and chest. This. Chong Ryong clicked her tongue. Even intervening in one art of sword control required tremendous concentration. But wielding art of sword control from different directions meant that the society leader had already figured out the weakness of the method of scattering chi. It seemed he was not called one of the six heavens for nothing. This time there's no choice. You have to dodge or block it. She thought that even without her advice, Mok Jae-un would have no choice but to move this time. However, swish, swish. He didn't move even when the swords were flying right in front of him. The startled Chong Ryong shouted, "Mortal!" It was right at that moment. Clang, clang. An astonishing scene unfolded before her eyes. The two swords flying from different directions lost strength almost simultaneously and fell to the ground. Chong Ryong was dumbfounded. He simultaneously scattered the chi of art of sword control flying from different directions at the same time. This guy. Ha. How could he do it to this extent? It was almost impossible without exhibiting a level of concentration that split one's mind in two. It seemed she had underestimated mortal. However, she wasn't the only one surprised. You truly astonish me. At the society leader's words, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian looked at the society leader with wide eyes. Judging from the society leader's surprised eyes, it seemed to be true. The society leader was astonished. Although he was said to have a severe illness, the society leader was one of the six heavens, the current peak of the martial arts world. A youngster astonished such a supreme grandmaster of the highest level? No, it was even ridiculous to call him a youngster. At the point where he could block the society leader's art of sword control in this way, that guy had already surpassed the level of a later generation disciple. Who the hell is this guy? Where did such a person pop up from? It went beyond simply dismissing him as a hostage from the righteous faction. He seemed quite dangerous. Bam. It was at that moment. Thud. Suddenly, the society leader's figure appeared in front of Mok Jiangun. The society leader placed his hand on the shoulder of Mok Jiangun, who was kneeling on one knee. Swish. I missed his movement. Mok Jiangun, who had reached the realm of the transformation and mastered the clear and manifest water-crossing steps of the eldest young master Na Yelriang, enabling him to move at ultra-high speeds, was confident in handling most speeds. However, the society leader's lightness skill was completely different from the clear and manifest water-crossing steps. It seemed to grab and pull the space. Moreover, the ground sank centered around the society leader's soles. How could a stepping technique with such weight possess such swiftness? At that moment of puzzlement, bam, gasp. At that moment, Mok Jiangun frowned and looked at the society leader. The inner force penetrating through his shoulder. It was like the rough waves surging in the ocean. Usually, when injecting inner force into the opponent's body, one would approach carefully as it could cause injury, but the society leader was not like that at all. Squish. The society leader's vast inner force tried to destroy his body from within. If he remained still, his heart meridian could rupture and his life would be in danger. In the end, he had no choice but to resist. Mok Jiangun aroused his death chi and scattered the society leader's chi surging into his body like waves. Whoosh. If it were chi of a similar level, he would have easily scattered it. However, the society leader's true chi, having surpassed the wall of walls and reached the profound realm, was at a level that even Mok Jiangun, who had reached the transformation realm, couldn't touch. The true chi surging in was too vast to be completely scattered even with the death chi. Drip. Drip. The clothes centered around his shoulder were stained with blood. His blood vessels had burst. Grit. Mok Jiangun clenched his teeth. If it was difficult even with the death chi, there was only one way. I have to let it flow out. Mok Jiangun guided the chi entering through his shoulder to the Yangchen acupoint on the soles of his feet without forcefully responding to it. Then, crack, rumble. The stone floor of the training grounds cracked, and the aftereffects of the true chi rose. Ho. Letting the chi flow out. Not bad. Then can you let this out too? Swoosh. At that moment, the society leader's chi intensified even more. Chi twice as strong as before was surging in. Ugh. At this, Mok Jiangun's face reddened and soon his blood vessels bulged out. His body was already under severe strain. If this continued, he might really become crippled or even die. Enduring this, Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian, who had been watching, finally stepped forward. Society leader. That's enough. Do not interfere. Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian blocked him. If the society leader had decided to kill him, no one could object. Even if it was the Shadow Clan Master, Mok Jiangun's master. How did it come to this? Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian was restless. Mok Jiangun was his disciple and practically a member of the Fire Faith Order. He couldn't lose him in a situation like this. However, bam. At that moment, the society leader removed his hand from Mok Jiangun's shoulder. As soon as he removed his hand, Mok Jiangun, with severe internal injuries, vomited blood and knelt on the ground. Thud. The society leader, looking down at Mok Jiangun, clicked his tongue. He had aggressively injected true chi to the point where all the blood vessels in his body were about to rupture. He couldn't even let it flow out. If it was true chi that caused blood vessels to burst, Anyone would find it difficult to endure that pain. However, this fellow didn't let out a single groan or show any signs of pain even in such agony. It seemed he hadn't passed the corpse blood valley for nothing. Interesting. You don't just have one type of chi in your body, but quite a variety of chi. Ha. Ha. Your innate senses, mental strength, endurance, everything is extraordinary. The atmosphere had been as if he would kill Mok Jiongun at any moment, but suddenly the praises flowing from the society leader's mouth made everyone look at him in puzzlement. Has Mok Jiongun passed the society leader's test? At that moment, unexpected words spilled from the society leader's mouth. All of this is beyond what the Shadow Clan master can handle. Society leader, what on earth? Stay still. Shadow Clan master. The society leader extended his hand and warned the Shadow Clan master not to interfere. Then he looked at Mok Jiongun and said, "What do you think? Would you like to become my fourth disciple?" Chapter 192, The Test 3. What do you think? Would you like to become my fourth disciple? At those words from the society leader's mouth, everyone in the training grounds was shocked. Just a moment ago they had been concerned about the situation escalating due to his excessive use of force, so this was a completely unexpected situation for them. Disciple? What does this mean? The one who showed the most notable reaction was Mong Muyak. As the vice leader's son, his eyes widened as he alternately looked at the society leader and Mok Jiongun. That was because there was something Mong Muyak, who took great pride in learning the sword, had longed for all his life: receiving teachings from the society leader. Clench. Mong Muyak's fist tightened. Although his father's influence played a role, how tirelessly had he worked to catch the society leader's attention after entering the inner fortress of the main building. Despite becoming one of the 5 tigers, known as the Heaven and Earth Society's greatest later generation disciples, the society leader had never even spared him a glance. Therefore, the society leader's proposal was both infuriating and envious. Ha! On the other hand, the reaction of Siep Chun, another member of the 5 tigers and the 3rd captain of the main building, was different. Rather, his gaze toward Mok Jiongun became close to admiration. He felt the same envy, but he had inwardly been impressed while watching him undergo the society leader's test. He's an incredible guy. Especially his ability to endure the pain of his blood vessels bursting during the society leader's inner force test without letting out a single groan or showing a pained expression was impressive. It made him wonder what he would have done in that situation. Is he the type of person who rises to the top? With that level of skill, it seemed sufficient for the society leader to covet him. However, while it was something to congratulate Mok Jiongun for, he wasn't sure if this was okay. As far as he knew, hadn't Mok Jiongun become Shadow Clan Master's disciple through the Corpse Blood Valley's closing ceremony just half a month ago? Siep Chun glanced at Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian with a concerned look. Naturally, having his disciple taken away wouldn't be pleasant. But is it okay? Contrary to his concern, the Shadow Clan Master's expression was fine. Rather, until just a moment ago he had been restless, worrying about what would happen to his disciple, but now his lips were twitching as if he was trying to hide his excitement. Siep Chun's guess was accurate. Ah, to have such an opportunity come. If it were other executives, they would likely object to this situation. It was a natural principle. Who would be pleased to have such a talented disciple taken away? Of course, in a similar context there was a sense of regret, but to the Shadow Clan Master, Mok Jiongun was not only his disciple but also a member of the same Fire Faith Order. Having such a member become a disciple of the society leader, the leader of the Heaven and Earth Society, was a golden opportunity for the Fire Faith Order to enter the center of the organization. There was a saying that it was darkest under the lamp. He believed that Mok Jiongun becoming the society leader's disciple would lay a great foundation for the reconstruction of the Fire Faith Order. At this, Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian slightly nodded his head while looking at Mok Jiongun. Meant not to worry about him. Society leader. At that moment, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian intervened. Why are you doing this? Please pause for a moment. Pause? Are you objecting to my authority right now? At the society leader's tone, which sounded displeased, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian hurriedly clasped his hands together, lowered his head and said, "That's not it. If the society leader, the leader of the sect, desires it, who could raise any objections? Then why are you doing this? I'm just concerned. Concerned. Yes. Cough cough. What are you concerned about? At the society leader's question, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian cautiously spoke. That child named Mok Jiongun became Shadow Clan Master's disciple through the Corpse Blood Valley's closing ceremony. And having multiple masters is not a problem, but if the society leader takes in that child, the meaning becomes different. It becomes forcibly taking a disciple. At those words, one of the society leader's eyes revealed through the bandages narrowed. He didn't seem very pleased. However, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian didn't stop speaking even while being mindful of his mood. Even if the society leader asks for the Shadow Clan Master's understanding and accepts that child as a disciple in this case, there may be objections from the Elder Council and executives. Objections from the Elder Council and executives? What does that mean? All the disciples you have taken in are from prestigious martial arts families of our sect. They are the children of those who have made great contributions since the sect's founding. At those words, the society leader scoffed. It was because he had understood what the vice leader was trying to say. Are you saying that his background is a problem? Yes, no matter how much it is the society leader's decision, this alone will invite objections from the Elder Council and executives. Objections. Although he has pledged loyalty, that child is originally a hostage from the righteous faction. He has no definite merits yet and hasn't been verified, so it seems right to reconsider readily accepting him as a disciple. At these words, his son Mong Muyak nodded in agreement. Indeed, his father's opinion was correct in this regard. If he were to accept a hostage from the righteous faction as a disciple, complaints would sprout up everywhere, and people would start doubting the society leader's true intentions. Already, due to his illness, he hadn't shown himself at official events for a long time, so hoping that there wouldn't be any complaints at all was truly a miscalculation. No way. While the vice leader was objecting, there was someone else who was also objecting. It was none other than Chong Ryong. As soon as the society leader made the proposal, Chong Ryong flew into a rage and sent an opposing opinion to Mok Jiongun. Ignore that bastard's proposal. It's a clan that plays with others using flattery and deception. Could be dangerous instead. Mok Jiongun was puzzled by her agitation. In fact, this was a good opportunity. Even without going through other disciples, it meant he had gained an opportunity to directly communicate with the society leader. Moreover, since he was already at odds with the eldest young master Na Yulriang, if he became the society leader's disciple, Na Yulriang would lose justification to openly attack him. That way he could expand his power under the society leader's protection. There was no way Chong Ryong wouldn't know about this golden opportunity. However, for her to object to this extent, is it a grudge? Just from her voice he could tell how angry she was. Because of that, Mok Jiongun could be certain. She wanted the destruction of the Heaven and Earth Society due to a deep-seated grudge, but at the center of that grudge was the society leader. No, to be precise, it would be the society leader's predecessor. However, with the passage of 100 years, the previous society leader would have already grown old and died. Therefore, for Chong Ryong, the focus of all her resentment would be his bloodline. She can't tolerate me entering under the bloodline of someone who is practically her enemy? It seemed that was her state of mind. Mok Jiongun was not used to the emotions of others. However, he had directly experienced the emotion of hatred when he lost his grandfather, so he could fully understand why she was getting emotional. Nevertheless, please calm down. Calm down. This isn't a matter to be calm about. Even without becoming that bastard's disciple, there are plenty of ways for you and I to exact our revenge. So don't fall for his empty flattery. Then it would take too long. You mortal. Chong Ryong. Are you going to ignore my advice again and do as you please? Emotions are clouding your judgment. Nonsense. I am sufficiently rational. There's an opportunity to officially approach the society leader, and it's darkest under the lamp, so we can foster strength and lure him into letting his guard down. Chong Ryong, you should be able to think of this much. At Mok Jiongun's words, Chong Ryong panted and didn't answer. It was difficult for her to control her anger due to her grudge, but she recognized that Mok Jiongun's opinion made more sense at the moment. Think rationally. Shouldn't we rejoice instead? Rejoice? Yes. Do you think this would be joyful for me? Yes. It's joyful. Wouldn't it be the best for Chong Ryong if, after becoming the society leader's disciple and gaining his trust, we could plunge the blade of betrayal into his heart? At Mok Jae-un's excited voice, as if the mere thought of it thrilled him, Chong Ryong's anger subsided for a moment. She had only thought of killing him, her anger flaring up at the thought of his bloodline. But after hearing Mok Jae-un's words, she realized he was right. Letting that bastard's bloodline know what betrayal is? Yes. This mortal guy was right. Just killing him wouldn't be satisfying. They needed to take away everything related to him and make him experience the same feelings as her. Only then would this 100-year-old grudge be resolved. Can you really do that to him? If you want, then do as you wish, Chong Ryong said. At this, Mok Jae-un's lips twitched, then he knelt on one knee, clasped his hands together in a formal greeting toward the society leader, and spoke in a loud voice. How could I refuse such an honor when the society leader is willing to accept me? Please take me in as your disciple. At Mok Jae-un's words, Vice Leader Mong Siocheon shook his head. Please reconsider. Although he said that, Mong Siocheon had already half given up. The society leader never took back the words he had spoken. Throughout his presentation of the reasons, the society leader had been looking at him with a displeased gaze. The outcome was already predictable. He would eventually push through with his intention. At that moment, the society leader spoke. Do you think I would care about such things? Is it going as expected? However, the society leader, who was about to continue, suddenly frowned and didn't speak. This continued for a brief moment. It was unclear why he was suddenly acting like this. Then the society leader continued. However, the vice leader's opinion also makes sense. Pardon. He has pledged loyalty, but there's the issue of his background, and his merits haven't been sufficiently verified, so objections from the elder council and executives are natural. What? Suddenly, the society leader was advocating for his opinion. Although he had his moods, he rarely withdrew his opinion in situations like this. But why was he doing this? While he was puzzled, the society leader said, however, this child is the sole successor of the moon sword technique. That alone is enough to appease the concerns about his background. Isn't that right? That's right. The moon sword technique. He had forgotten about that. Among the elder council and executives, except for a few, no one knew about this fact. However, if they were to learn that Mok Jae-un had mastered the moon sword technique, which had been lost for 100 years, it would create a huge stir. Not considering this important factor was an error in judgment. At that, the society leader continued. However, this time I will respect the vice leader's opinion. Pardon. If he successfully completes this mission, this child's merits and ideals will be sufficiently verified. Isn't that right? That's. The society leader's words are correct. This mission was very important. Whether the society leader could return to the front lines or not could be determined through this mission. Therefore, if he were to succeed in this mission, it would be enough to acknowledge his merits. Moreover, if he goes to the Imperial Palace, it will be swarming with those righteous faction bastards. If this guy doesn't ask for their help or attempt to escape, he will certainly be verified as a person of our sect. His rapid growth and attitude were quite irritating. He even thought that he might become a poison to the society leader instead. However, if all of the above were satisfied, there would be no problem with the society leader accepting him as a disciple. Rather, it would be a blessing for the sect to gain an outstanding disciple. But I should tell Muyak just in case. He felt he should have his son Mong Muyak monitor him. If he were to discover even the slightest hint of different intentions, he would need to swiftly deal with him. At that, the society leader turned his gaze to Mok Jae-un and said, "Did you hear? Yes. Complete this mission successfully. Then I will accept you as my fourth disciple." The mission? Mok Jae-un asked in puzzlement. He had come here without hearing anything in the first place. Then the society leader chuckled and pointed at the vice leader with a nod, saying, "The vice leader will explain the mission." With those words, the society leader approached Mok Jae-un and whispered, "I hope you will meet my expectations." Then the society leader turned around, his hands clasped behind his back, and left the training grounds. Watching his departing figure, Mok Jae-un licked his lips. This has become troublesome. He thought it was an opportunity to directly become the society leader's disciple. If that happened, he believed he could find out about the ghost sword within a short period of time, but as expected, nothing was easily resolved. He had no choice but to take on that so-called mission. Only then could he become the fourth disciple. Thump thump. Walking along the corridor, the society leader placed his palm against the wall and coughed violently. Cough cough. The coughing lasted longer than usual. Next to him, someone who had been hiding revealed themselves from a shadowed area. You have overexerted yourself. It seems so for the first time in a while. The society leader wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and spoke. The guy was more outstanding than expected, so he had to draw out more true chi, straining himself quite a bit. The person who revealed themselves tried to support the society leader, who was leaning against the wall. Then the society leader shook his head. No. It's fine. But there's no need to make a fuss. I know my body better than anyone. Understood. At the society leader's words, the man in the shadows slightly lowered his head and answered. Then, as if suddenly remembering, the society leader asked him, "By the way, what was that thing you said earlier?" That the guy seemed familiar. It was the society leader who had reluctantly postponed accepting him as a disciple due to the voice transmission telling him to stop. If it weren't for that, he wouldn't have accepted the vice leader's objection. At the society leader's question, the person obscured by the shadows answered, "It's not certain." Not certain. He definitely resembles someone, but his identity, name, everything is too different. Resembles? Who does he resemble? Cough cough. The society leader coughed violently and staggered. The man hurriedly walked forward to support him. Thanks to that, the man's face, which had been obscured by shadows, was revealed under the bright lantern light. He was a middle-aged man with a long scar above his left eyebrow, and in his right hand he held a black sword that looked as if it had been burned. The man, supporting the society leader, answered the previous question, the sickle-slaying demon. The sickle-slaying demon? Who is that? It was an unfamiliar nickname that the society leader had heard for the first time. Then the man spoke in a meaningful voice, "A dead man who should have died."